Hi, everybody. I think we're ready to get back down to work. This is Stan, and thank you for being here with us. And I will be guiding you through this afternoon's material in the EasyLanguage Bootcamp. Mike set a good pace for the morning. I want to double back and review a little bit, answer a couple of questions, and then we'll forge ahead. A couple of the questions that came up. I guess, let me click this over. Stay with me 1 second. There we go. You should be in good shape. Okay, question came up about the line numbers. Mike answered it in the text, but I also wanted to show everyone where it is. If you click on, in the development environment, if you click on Tools, Options on the General tab, you'll find a setting for line numbers. For some reason, that is not checked by default, and on a new installation, if I get a new computer, that's one of the first things I do, because those line numbers are really useful. Now, a couple of the other questions that came in. Let's see. The change, Petra was asking about changing from indicator to histogram. It doesn't change automatically. There's some interesting things related to that, so let's discuss that. That's why I asked that you hold off a little bit on that question, because that's important. Let me just open a document. It doesn't matter. This is an exercise we're going to get to in a few minutes. Don't worry about that. Or it's actually one you did already, and we're going to reiterate it in a few minutes. But if you right-click into the properties, and I know you've touched into this dialog box already, and we will be using more and more of what's in here. Thumb is that when you change properties, there's a little more nuance than this, but if you change properties and then verify, it does not change an existing instance of an indicator. If you change properties and then verify, it does not change an existing instance of an indicator. So if I was to change, this indicator, whatever it is, doesn't matter. If I said, well, you know what, this line, I don't want it to default to yellow, I want it to default to red for this indicator. I can change the color, I can click OK, I can verify, but any existing instances of this indicator will not have their color changed. Any new instances of the indicator will use these new properties. Now that goes for, I'm going to say everything in this properties dialog. There may be a small exception in here, but I'm going to say everything in this dialog. It also goes for things like input values. If I change the default input for this indicator to 12 and verify, it won't change any existing instances. But from now on, the default value for that input will be 12. And what's behind that with properties and inputs is the assumption if you're changing a default, well, the assumption if you're changing a default is that obviously you want a different default. But we don't assume that in every existing place where you might have this particular indicator that you want the color change. We don't know what you may have customized chart by chart for either a color, as I mentioned before, or an input length, or an input value. So when these are certain in the properties dialog, change it, verify, it does not automatically change in the chart. Change an input value here, verify, it does not automatically change in a chart or in radar screen. It does not change the existing instances, but any new uses would use the new values. I missed the very beginning of the class today, but one of the first things we usually do in the class is you'll write an indicator and it plots in the wrong subgraph. And we go over using, and I'm sure Mike did this in one way or another, we go over using, let's say, the scaling tab. And on the scaling tab, we go over things like same axis as underlying data or right or left axis. Well, if you were to change this is a property. If you change it and verify, it does not change any existing instance. Okay, I wanted to make that clear. Let me catch up. I see you guys are typing. I don't know what you mean about information about the properties parameter. There are help pages about in the dialog. You can use the help button that's down here. Heinrich. You do need, and yes, Petra, you do need to reinsert the indicator again. It does not refresh. You would have to, you can remove the other one and insert it, or just insert a new version of it. The load additional data, that's very good, excellent question, Heinrich, and I'm not going to completely answer it now, but I'll give you the tease answer at the moment. Let me see if I can do this. This load additional data is only for radar screen, only for radar screen. Now, nothing we've written so far, well, the things we've written so far could be used in radar screen, but we've been focused on the chart, and we're going to remain focused on the chart. Tomorrow afternoon, the curriculum does have some information about writing specifically for radar screen, and we'll bring it up then, whichever of us is on, Mike or Jesus or myself, we'll bring that up. It only relates to radar screen. You can make that note right now, and other than that, I don't want to get too off track. But we haven't even looked at it because it does not mean anything for us here while we're focused on taking our indicators and putting them into charts. Okay, so this morning you started from scratch in EasyLanguage, and we've been focusing on indicators, and we're going to stay on indicators for a while, and then we will delve a little bit off that into show me's and paint bars. Indicators are the easiest way to communicate some of these basic constructs and get through all these dialogues, so we're going to stay on those for a while. But if you think about it, you really covered quite a lot of territory, from mathematical operators, variables, started to use functions, inputs. So a lot of the nuts and bolts of EasyLanguage are already at your fingertips. And as we do these exercises, you may have noticed, we keep on using the things we've already learned and building more and building more and building more. Sometimes we reiterate something like Mike did with real body earlier, number 4, and then average real body, or real body average. So sometimes we revisit something just to see how the language, how we could rewrite or amplify something. Sometimes we revisit an analysis concept, like we did with real body, where we did an iteration of a wild idea for an oscillator and then decided, let's take another stab at it with some kind of a smoothing. So we try and keep those themes as we go through the course. And the last topic in particular that we were covering, let me clean this up a little bit. The last topic in particular that we were covering was inputs. So I want to do another exercise with inputs. It's essentially a price channel. It brings in some more functions. You started to use functions. I don't know if I mentioned that. So we need, as we go through all these exercises, we're going to be using different functions. And when we created the course, we tried to bring in the functions that we think are most useful, most commonly used, the ones we get the most questions about. And then, of course, as you look through the dictionary and experiment more, you'll find more and more functions available. So here's the one we're going to work on next, the exercise called trailing high-low, number 15. And that is, let's see. This is the finished product, so I'm going to give you the advanced view and then we'll write it together. So it is essentially a price channel. It shows the trailing N-bar high, the trailing N-bar low. So as the market is not making a new high, it stays for a certain number of bars until it drops out of the data series and then falls. For trend followers, the penetration of the low line would indicate persistent downside. Penetration on upside would indicate persistent bullishness. This happens to be a GLD 5-minute. Oh, I'm sorry. Now you can see it. This is a GLD 5-minute chart. Sorry about that. This is the price channel. So what I was saying is that punching through the lower part of the channel, bearishness, punching through the upper part, showing bullish characteristics. It's a trailing high, so when that high is in the data series, the high might be steady, and then as it drops out, it begins to fall. So it's the trailing N-bar high. We'll make it 8. And we'll write this, and then we actually come back to this tomorrow with a strategy based around the concept that I just explained. Okay. So let's take a look at writing this. I want to make sure you can see this okay. So I'm going to return to the development environment. We'll come to that other one in just a minute. I'm going to click on New Indicator. And this one is going to be exclamation 15, trailing high, low. I'll make this bigger so you can see. I think the font's okay, but I pushed the font up here a little bit, so hopefully you can see that okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to leave a few lines blank at the top. We'll come in and fill those in a minute. But I am going to declare two variables. User declared variables, I'll pick my names, and these variables are for my upper line and my lower line. And I'll call one of them high line, and I'll call the other one low line. I know I will need to calculate those in some way, so I'll give them two names right now, just declare those two variables. Okay, variable declaration statement, now my variable assignment statement, high line equals. Now it's the trailing high. So if we look in the dictionary, we will find a function. Just recap the dictionary real quick. Remember, the part of the dictionary that we're really concerned with at this stage in this class is the EasyLanguage part of the dictionary, not the objects part. You can move on to that as you go ahead. But what I want to find, since I want to find the highest recent price, I'm going to search for a function or a reserve word called highest. It's a function, but I don't know that yet. So I'll type in the word highest and click that white arrow in the green box to do the search. Now, it's not always clear what we're looking for. I am leading you along for a purpose, hopefully to give you more comfort in navigating through this. But the function I'm looking for is highest. Now notice there are others: highest array, highest bar, highest high D. I'm not sure what that one is. But the one I'm looking for is highest, so just take that for me at the moment. And it returns the highest value. We can see in the information box. It returns the summary box, returns the highest value over length bars. It has two parameters, price and length. That's the one I want. I'll drag it right in. Whoops, right there. Okay. And when I drag it in, it puts the parentheses for me, and that little tip tells me what parameters I need, price and length. Well, what am I looking for the highest for? Remember, this is a price channel we're mocking up. So I'm looking for the highest high for the last length bars. Remember, in using functions, if I'm repeating what we covered already, hopefully it's helpful. We'll keep moving though. Remember a function, you must supply the parameters. They're never optional. A function's parameters must be supplied, and they must be in the correct order. So I can't put the length value and then the price value. I will get some calculation. I'll get a calculation that doesn't make sense. So it's the highest high over the last length bars. I don't know what length I want yet, so I'm just going to put the word length in there, and then we'll have to figure out what to do with it. And we'll write the corresponding variable assignment statement, low line, equals. Now, you might have assumed already that if there's a function highest, there's probably a function lowest, and you'd be correct. And in this case, we're looking for the lowest low of the last length bars. Okay, now I'm going to have to deal with length. Well, I said we were going to use 8. I mentioned that when I was showing it to you. But there may be times when I want to use a different value or experiment with a different value, and this is the topic we've been covering right now, which is inputs. So instead of putting the number 8 right in there and right in there, this word length will become an input. I have to declare it. So I went back up to the top where I left a little empty space. And I will declare the word length, and I will give it a default value of 8. And there are a couple other inputs in the archive version, but we'll just stick to this and just make that the only input. So by default, it's the 8-bar price range, high and low. Double refers to the double refers to the return of the function. A function can return text, can return Boolean, true, false. It can return numbers. When it returns numbers, it could return integers or double values, meaning all those decimals. Now, let's go over what we've written. Petra asked a good question, so let me point something out. And I'm going to spend an extra minute or two on this because you've just started working with functions, and we're going to be doing a lot more with them. And hopefully, I can save you some stress time as you move along. Let me just type a function again. I'm just going to type the word highest. Open the parentheses just so you see this again. We're not going to use the function again, but I just wanted you to see it. So in the tooltip that comes up, it's calling for two parameters, price and length. I said I must supply them in the right order, otherwise I'm going to come out with nonsense numbers. Here also you see the double. Maybe that's where you saw it, Neil. In here, you may see it also in the dictionary and other places. Double refers to the fact that these are numeric values, numeric parameters that have to be supplied, as opposed to rarely is it text, but it could be true, false values that have to be supplied. And in fact, you'll see that in one of the exercises probably tomorrow. But here's the other point I want to make. The two words that are there by default, price and length, those are the words that are stored as our placeholders. The placeholder words for a function must be edited. You cannot just leave those as is. If you want to use the word as we did, then you need to declare it, generally as an input. In other words, these words are placeholders to tell you what type of information needs to be supplied. But you have to do something with them. Either replace them, as I did with the words high and low, or take the word and declare it as an input. This function, as I wrote it on line 8 here, won't work because it needs these parameters. This one doesn't mean anything. It's a placeholder word. This one is declared. In an input declaration and in a variable declaration, the values are in parentheses. They are not in hard brackets. In fact, nothing you've done so far, I don't think, is... Oh, yes, you did reference data from previous bars. So you did already use the hard brackets. The hard brackets are used for referencing data from previous bars, and we will actually get to that in a minute in here. The hard brackets are also used when you get to using arrays and certain other things. But in a declaration of an input or the declaration of a variable, it is always parentheses. Okay, so let's clean this up and move along. So I've got my two variables declared. I've got my two variables assigned. I have an input declaration for the length of my price channel. Okay, then all I need are my plot statements. Plot 1, high line, and I'll just call it trailing high. That's not that neat. I'll make it look a little nicer. Trail high. And plot 2, low line, and we'll call that trail low. Remember, the plot name is optional, but it's very useful because you'll see it in the formatting. And must be in quotes, and there are no EasyLanguage rules per se about the plot name because it's just a piece of text. So you can call it whatever you want. My suggestion, though, is to make it something useful so that when you look at the chart or you go into the formatting and it's named, it means something. It means something to you. It means something for what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? Now that should verify, so I'm going to hit the verify, excuse me, the verify toolbar button. And it is saved and verified. You may not be able to see that at the bottom, but you can see no errors. So I can move this up a little bit so you can see saved and verified right down at the bottom of my development environment. And there's one other change I would like to make, and then we'll take a look at this. Okay. Properties. We're actually going to make two changes, one now, and then we'll come back and make one edit. Okay. The one change here I want to make in the properties, let's see, chart style, they're going to be lines, that's fine. But I do want to look at scaling because the default is right axis, meaning it's in its own subgraph. But do you remember, we want this as an overlay, if you remember seeing my chart. So I want this overlaid on the price bars, same axis as underlying data. And the one other change I will make to get rid of the blue, because I know that comes through very poorly in the projector, is I will change the colors of the two lines. So I think you'll be able to see them better in the projector. That one's optional. Remember, once you change, we always say verify, then change the properties, then verify again. The reason is that if you don't verify once, this dialog is not completely populated. So if you verify, this will be populated. You can make your changes if necessary, and if you do make them, you have to verify again. Okay. Travis says, can you have clean readable text as the input name? I'm not sure what clean readable means. You can use, the only restriction on a name of an input is, the only formal restriction is the length. And I don't remember what the character limit is. It just went out of my head. If it's too long, you'll get an error when you try and edit. You can use any set of characters. The only thing is a character limit. You can't have any spaces in the input name. You could use an underscore, but you can't have an underscore as the leading character. Here's my feeling. If you really want to use a name and you're not sure if it'll work, try and verify it. There's no damage. Verification errors are really the easy part. Making sure your math is right and it has any trading value, that's the hard part. But verification is easy because it tells you where the error is, and if it says word too long, well, you know the word's too long, or the space doesn't work. One other suggestion on naming inputs and variables, and Mike may have mentioned it in relation to variables. But don't use the name for an input, don't use a name that's already a reserved word. You can often get away with it, and it's going to be reinforcement of bad behavior in my mind. Because you're in a sense redefining a word. And this is for both inputs and variables. If it comes up in blue and it's a reserved word, don't use it. If it comes up in magenta, it's a function, don't use it. Because you'll end up overwriting something or redefining something and confusing yourself if you have a problem. So I just never do it. If you really want to, put an X in front of it so your eye will see X range. And you'll know what it means, but it's black. It should always be black for input names and variable names. As I said, you can often get away with reserved words and functions, but it's just bad behavior that can open up problems. Okay. So let me verify this once again. I want to go back to the chart. Here we are. Okay. Now, remember, this is a price channel. So the point of this is to see it breaking out of the channel. This is a GLD 5-minute. I'm going to create this chart again. So here's our GLD 5-minute, and I'll insert the indicator we just wrote, which was exclamation. I have a lot of stuff in this computer. Exclamation 15. I will find it somewhere, I hope. Used to use the exclamations because they would come up at the top, but now I've used just about everything in the book. There it is. Okay. Exclamation 15, trailing high, low, and click OK. Okay, there are the two lines. Now it actually looks a little different than the other one, besides the colors. We scroll back to the same point in the market. What's the difference between the two? Well, if you this one, the one we just wrote, the lines never get penetrated. The lines always surround the data. If you can look at it versus the x-axis, you'll see this is not what it is, but visually it looks shifted one bar. Okay, now the point of this is that if I'm looking for breakouts, I'm never going to find them with this tool. And if I have any logic built around it, I'll never get a true. In other words, if you look at the chart the way we just wrote this one, If I said if breaks out, then give me an alert or give me a true, or if there was a trading signal, I wouldn't get any because I'm always moving to accommodate the new high or new low. So come back for a minute. I want to show you how we're going to fix it, but it makes a very important point about functions. We said look for the highest high of the last 8 bars. By default, functions include the current bar in their calculation. Now, sometimes that's exactly what we want. Most of the time, that's what we want. But sometimes it isn't because we're trying to make a comparison. If I look for the highest high of the last 8 bars, including the current bar, let me rephrase it. If I look to exceed the highest high of the last 8 bars, including the current bar, I can't do it because I'm always raising the goal, raising the barrier, always moving the goalpost. So in this case, what I really want to do is look for the highest high of the last 8 bars starting 1 bar ago. Now, we don't always do that, but sometimes the important thing to know about functions is that they include the current bar by default. Most of the time, that's perfectly acceptable. Sometimes we want to push it back 1 bar. We want to say, yes, I want the highest high of the last 8 bars, not including the current one that's ticking. And this is one way we can do it using a displacement or a 1 bar offset. And of course, these we put in square brackets. Yeah, you can get away with some things like this, Travis. You may not have covered this yet, but you can put, in EasyLanguage, you can put notations in either by using the double slash. See, it's all green, it's just notation. Or you can use curly brackets, and then they're green and they're skipped over. So if you put this, you can, I don't really love doing this because I don't like how it looks, but you can get away with this. And I'll show you what it looks like when we get to the back to the chart. Okay, so now here's the one we just wrote. Now you see the market breaking through. You see when it's penetrating the top and penetrating the bottom because we're separating the current bar from the 8 before it. And in the format dialog, if we look at inputs, length is not there. Note is not there. You know what? I put it in the wrong spot, I think. I don't want to get too carried away. You'd have to put this, I think, in there. See if that works. I know one of my colleagues used to do it. I don't particularly love how it looks, but that's just a kind of a preference. It's verified. Let's try this. Let's put it in again because we just changed the input. Yeah, there you see it. So next to the value, and then putting in curly brackets means it's skipped over. So you could do it that way. Other than that, it's up to you to make other notations. And it is an important point, however, to make the names of the inputs something you will recognize, because that's what the user interface is. Hopefully, after you write something, even if you were the one who wrote it, you're not going to go back to the EasyLanguage. You want to look at the dialog box and know what you meant. So sometimes my input names are a little bit longer in order to communicate to myself what I was trying to accomplish. Okay. Yes, and you have this in the book, of course, and you have the download available for it. So here's the EasyLanguage. That little note in line 1 next to the 8 is just Travis's question about putting notes to himself. I don't know if you have a length restriction. You'll have to try that out. You can experiment with it. 1 variable declaration statement, 2 variable assignment statements, 2 plot statements. And the main point also here was that we said, find me the highest high of the last 8 bars, but start counting 8 from 1 bar ago. So I'm separating the current bar from the prior. Okay. We need to start to get into logic. So now we have an arsenal of quite a bit of syntax and also navigation tools around the development environment, the dictionary. But now we need to start to get into logic. So as I introduce this, what I would like to do, we're going to put a lot out on the table at once. Our first goal is to write alerts. That's what we're going to use our logical statements for, is to write alerts. But we will be using logic for many other things besides that. When I say logic, I'm talking about true and false statements and the like, and I want to go through those now. In the PDF that if you grab that PDF this morning, we're on the page 22 in terms of the footer page, and in terms of the PDF document, it's page 27. The top of the page says relational operators. Well, let's see if we can move this along a bit. Okay. So I'm going to lay out a lot related to logic, true-false evaluations. The first thing we need to do is go over relational operators. And relational operators are what we use to compare two quantities. Now, there are 8 relational operators in EasyLanguage. You see 6 of them on this slide. These 6 are pretty straightforward: less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, not equal to. That's exactly how they're written in EasyLanguage, the way you see on the excuse me, on the slide. Those keyboard characters, and that's pretty straightforward. We compare two quantities, two numeric values, using these 6. Now, there are 2 more in EasyLanguage besides these 6. These 6 are the common ones, obviously. But the other 2 are really for traders because they make comparisons on consecutive bars. And these 2 are, let me get a pointer here, crosses over and crosses under. So let me describe it. I said that these 2 relational operators, the other 6 compare 2 quantities. These compare 2 quantities on consecutive bars. So crosses over, which could also be written as crossover, crosses above, or cross above, any of those will verify. They are written as 2 words, however, as you'll see. This is true if x is greater than y on the current bar, x was less than y previously. We want to identify the bar when one moving average crosses over another, or an oscillator crosses over 0, or an oscillator crosses under 70, or price crosses above a moving average. Crosses under, or crosses below, or cross below returns true if x is less than y on the current bar, x was greater than y previously. So we have these 8 relational operators. Now we use these relational operators to build true-false expressions. Close equals open. That's either true or false. The high is greater than the high of a bar ago. It's either true or false. The date is not equal to the date 1 bar ago. That's either true or false. We haven't worked with date yet, but we will. It's a numeric quantity representing the date, obviously. Close crosses over average close 20. Does the close cross over a moving average? Crosses over is the relational operator, and this true-false expression is true or false, returns true or false. Okay, so I threw a lot at you. Here's the next piece. The next piece are conditional statements or if-then statements. We need relational operators to make true-false expressions. We need true-false expressions to build conditional statements. So it's called a conditional statement or an if-then statement. And it lets us have an EasyLanguage instruction that's dependent on a true-false evaluation. So it looks something like this. An if-then statement contains a true-false expression. If true-false expression, then perform some action. Calculate a variable, plot a line, put a dot on the chart. In a strategy, it could be buy or sell. If something is true, then an action to be taken. The line return after then doesn't matter. The indent doesn't matter. That's all stylistic to make it more readable for us. semicolon at the end of the statement. So here are some examples. Well, we'll see some examples in a second. I said our first use of logical statements, of relational operators, true-false expressions, conditional statements, is going to be to write alerts. That's going to be our first goal in doing this. But we will use these logical structures in strategies and in many other ways other than alerts. But it's a good way to introduce them. Now let me define what an alert is in EasyLanguage and in TradeStation. Alerts are, we wrote this very specifically because we want you to understand how we use the word alert. They're audio-visual or electronic notifications of specific market events as defined by the user. Okay. Indicators, show-me's, and paint bars can include alert instructions, and it's up to you to write them in. These are your indicators, your show-me's, your paint bars. If you don't write in alert instructions, and sometimes you won't, you may not want the alert, but it's up to you to include alert instructions in the EasyLanguage. Strategies cannot contain alert instructions. You cannot write alert commands into strategies. Strategies have their own alerting system through the trade manager. New strategy order filled, that all happens directly through the trade manager, not through your EasyLanguage. Okay, the EasyLanguage must, for the indicator or show me a paint bar, has to contain the alert criteria. That's what I just said. If you don't want an alert in something, that's fine, but if you want it, you have to write it. And then the alert must be enabled. You have to throw the switch. You have to turn on the alert. So if you write an indicator and sometimes you want an alert and sometimes you don't, write the alert conditions in. You don't have to turn it on if you don't want it. And of course, because it's your own EasyLanguage, you can always go back and add it later on if you find you want it, and you can always change it. So here's an example. Before we write a couple of things, here's an example of some statements. So here was our basic true, false, conditional statement, if then, if true, false expression. If something is true, then the alert command is real simple. It's the word alert. That's it. That's the alert command. We'll fancy it up a little bit, but that's the basic command. Okay. So here we wrote, if close is greater than the highest close of the last 10 bars, starting 1 bar ago, otherwise it'll never be true, then alert. One quick point. Notice it doesn't say if this is true, it's understood. It says if, let's see if I can do this, if this true false expression, so it's automatically, the default is it will evaluate that for true. So it doesn't say if it's true, it says if, and the default test is for true, then alert. Ralph, crosses over and crossover are exactly the same. They both verify, whatever you like. If you want to make it more readable, you want to save keystrokes, knock yourself out. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of, we'll add some alert criteria to something that we wrote earlier, envelope 2, and then we'll do one exercise from scratch in particular because it's a nice recap of just about everything we've done so far. Let me catch up with my notes. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the development environment, and this is where I had something open before. This was envelope 2. This is the archive version. So you'll notice there's a lot of green because in the archive, in the electronic one we give you, we put in notes. So you'll see some of the notes have double slashes in front, and then the rest of the line is notation. It's in green. And where there is more extensive notation, we use curly brackets. The difference between the two, double slash, everything to the right on that same line, no matter how long it goes, is going to be green, notation, not part of the processing. And you don't need any closing character. The double slash, everything to the right. With the curly brackets, everything from the open, the left French brace or curly bracket, till you close it with the right French brace or curly bracket. including across multiple lines, will be remarked out or will be notation. So what's the difference? It's just convenience. Double slash is easy. I have a few words up here. Here I have a whole paragraph where I put something in. So the whole paragraph, instead of having double slash at the head of every line, I just use the curly brackets. That's the only difference. Just make it easy for yourself. Now to make this a little easier to see, I'm going to take this out just so you don't have to look at it. And this was an exercise that you did earlier. You did at least one iteration of this with envelopes. And we're just going to add some alert criteria to it. I'll remind you about saving your work and renaming it so that it's easy to find again, and so that you don't necessarily overwrite previous versions. So this will be exclamation 16, and that matches what you have in the book, envelope 2 alert. And we're going to leave the body as it is, but we're going to add alert criteria. Now what I want to do is I want to get an alert. Let me switch over to a chart for a second. Okay, I'll leave the same chart. Let me just remove this, and let me put in that number 15. There we go. I'm sorry, 16. Okay. There we go. This is the archive version. It just triggered. Okay. Here's what our alert is. Our alert will be the entire bar is below the bottom line or the entire bar is above the top line. So each of these in their turn would have triggered the alert. These would have triggered the alert. So it's not a crossover bar, but the bar is completely above the top line or completely below the bottom. And the reason I did that really was just to make the point in how we write things and how we turn what we see and describe in a chart into easy language. So here's the way we'll do it. If low is greater than upper line, then alert. So if the low is greater than the upper line, well, then the whole bar must be greater than the upper line. All we have to do is compare the extreme value. If high is less than lower line, then alert. That's it. That should verify, and it does. I didn't change anything above. I used a conditional statement, an if-then statement. If true-false expression, then, and the command is alert. Now remember, an alert only triggers based on the last bar on the chart. An alert is not for finding when this happened 20 and 30 and 50 and 100 bars ago. The whole idea of an alert is you want to be notified that something is happening right now. The alert will work on the current bar before it closes. Let me make a point about that. You have a choice here in the properties in the development environment, or chart by chart, Neil. Could be done chart by chart. Whether you want the indicator to update on every tick or only at the close of the bar. So if you say that I only want this to update at the close of bar, well, that will include the indicator and the alert. But if you leave it checked, which is the default and appropriate for most indicators, now it will update tick by tick. In other words, you'll see the little lines tickling around as they recalc. And the alerts will be triggered intra-bar as well. Let me go back to the chart. And this is the archive copy, but it's got the same commands. So let me enable the alert. I'll have it alert just once so it doesn't keep on driving me nuts. And I like the voice commands. I don't know if you like those. You can look at the help files on how to configure these. Or you can just leave the default so you'll get the alert. So I get the pop-up. It was out of the field of view, so I just pulled it in. And I don't know if you could hear the voice command that you have an alert. Okay, the entire bar is below the bottom. band. So we get an alert. Those alerts are also logged into the message center. So if I look in the message center, in addition to all kinds of other things I have in here, you'll see envelope, 16 envelope, 5-minute bar, 119 and a quarter. Okay. We'll do a little work on the next exercise and then we'll take a break. But I think it's a good exercise because it recaps a lot of what we've been doing all day. Okay. So we'll write this next one, and then we'll start to take the logic into, after this one we get into show me's and paint bars. Okay. So I'm going to click here for a new indicator, and this one is 17. Let me get my notes. Okay. I'll make it exclamation 17, MA and bands. This is a Bollinger Band-ish kind of indicator, but we'll we'll write it out ourselves, and you'll see the structure. Okay. As you create documents in EasyLanguage, you don't always start at the top. There are going to be inputs. I don't know what they are yet, but I left a few lines up there for my inputs, and I'm going to declare variables. I may not even know what they are yet, so I'll have to go back up to the top and do the declaration. But while I'm being creative, I know that I want a few lines. I want a moving average. That's one calculation I want to make. So I'll use the average function. We can use a simple arithmetic average. And I know the parameters I need. If I don't know, they're in that tooltip, but we'll make it price and length. Remember, price and length won't verify. This won't work as it is. We'll have to come back and fix them. But that's okay. I'll come back and fix it. And then I said this is a Bollinger Band-ish, so we do want standard deviations. Now, if we look in the dictionary, now I'll be honest with you, this can get a little confusing. Because if we search for, let's say, for standard, we get a lot of stuff. Now, some of them are standardized, some of them are standard error. But there are at least, let's see, standard deviation annual, standard deviation array, volatility standard deviation. There are a number of these. It can be a little confusing. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to use this one, which defaults to population. By the way, if you're trying to do the standard deviation of a sample or you want the choice, use this one, because this one lets you decide if you want sample or population. We'll just use a little shortcut and use this one that's stddev. You will have to dig in a little bit, read the help files, send us an email if you have a question, but do a little of your homework first and you'll see the differences in what's available. So 2 parameters, price and length. You know what? I'm going to shortcut a little bit, copy, and paste. Okay. Then I have 2 other calculations I'm going to make. Whoops, high band, which is going to be M average plus standard deviation, and low band equals M average minus standard deviation. Okay, a few points. So we used, and you've seen this before in some of the exercises, I'm pretty sure. So we're using 2 variables to calculate another variable, and that's fine. There are some sub-calculations in here. Maybe I could certainly juggle them around a little bit, but I'm trying to think through. I know I need a moving average. I know I need the standard deviation that I want to add and I want to subtract. If I want to come back and make it more efficient or change things around later, I can do that. But I've got to get it out of my brain and onto paper or into the development environment. Okay. Then I want to plot a few things. So I'm going to plot, let's say, the moving average. Now remember, this won't verify. because we need to do the housekeeping. But sometimes while the idea is fresh in your head, you want to get it scratched out. High band. And I'll just call it high band. And not plot 3. Low band. Okay, I'm in pretty good shape so far. I've assigned variables. I use 2 functions. I use the parameter names for the functions in here as placeholders, but I have to fix those. 4 variables, 3 plot statements. I name the plots. It's recapping a lot of what we've done all day. Well, okay, so now let me address some of the housekeeping. The words price and length won't work. So I need to do something with those. I either can replace them with specific values, or I can declare them as inputs. So I'll make price close, and I'll make length. My notes have it as 18. It doesn't matter for the exercise, but that's what I have in my notes. And now, of course, it won't verify until the variables are declared. M-average. Oops. The standard deviation variable. Then high band. And low band. Okay, now that should be enough to get this verified, and it did. The last thing I want to add are alert criteria. And again, we're doing this in particular because this is bringing together pretty much everything we've seen so far. So if price, we can refer to the input here, crosses over high band, then alert. And I'll show you one trick. It's in the archive, so you have it in your copy as well. If you want to put a custom message in here, you can put in a custom message, and I really like this a lot when using the voice engine because it reads your message. Price has crossed over high band. There's even a little more in the archive version that you can read. And if price crosses under low band, then alert. And I'll save myself a little typing. Don't forget the evils of copy and paste. Price has crossed under low band. Okay, that should verify, and it does. Okay, remember we got to check our properties. I verified it once, but now I know that I want this to overlay the price bars because this is kind of a Bollinger kind of picture. I know that I want them to be lines, so they should default to lines, not a big deal. I can check the chart color. Maybe we'll make the moving average, that center line, yellow, and we'll make the upper band cyan and the lower band cyan, so we'll make them symmetric. I think those are probably the main things. Certainly the scaling was the critical part. And let's see if we can force an alert. I'll take that off here. This is again a GLD 5-minute. I don't know if we'll see it on here, but we'll give it a shot. Now this is 17. I'm going to prompt for format because now I did not enable the alert in the development environment. I don't want it enabled by default. Otherwise, every time I put it on a chart, or in radar screen, it's going to be banging away at me. So I'm just going to turn it on for this chart. See if we get a tick. Of course, GLD is not going to tick and give me the satisfaction, right? I'm changing the number of minutes, by the way, in the interval. Make sure I wrote it right. Yeah, it's written okay. Okay, got the satisfaction of that at least. Notice how my messages, my custom messages here, price has crossed under low band. That will also be, I don't know if you could hear the text-to-speech engine, but it also read that message to me. And in the message center, I can see the info is my custom message. Price has crossed under low band. Recapping this, what we did is we used a conditional statement, an if-then, to trigger the alert. We used an if-then to trigger the alert. We used a custom alert message following that, so that we see that in the message center. We hear that in the text-to-speech engine, which is my preference. You see it in the alert message. We also actually referenced our input. So if for some reason we change this from close to be based on the high or low, our alert would be consistent with our calculation. So we use the input in the true-false expression in the conditional statement. Okay, we are going to move on to show me's and paint bars. Got a few other exercises. We'd like to get through about 5 more for the day. We're going to take a break now. We're going to make it, let's see, I think we'll come back at a quarter of. So that is 13, almost 13 minutes, which is a Fibonacci number.